It was a sunny Saturday afternoon in the city park, and Karen was fuming. She had spent the entire morning overseeing the repainting of an old park bench near the duck pond, determined to make it look brand new. And it had turned out beautifully. A rich, glossy teal that complemented the lush greenery surrounding it. But as Karen stood back to admire her work, she noticed something that made her blood boil. Someone had vandalized the bench, tagging it with black spray paint. In large, messy letters, the perpetrator had scrawled Karen's BNC across the center of the seat. Unbelievable. Karen huffed, her face flushing with rage. She glanced around the park, scanning the area for any suspicious loiterers, but the culprit was long gone. Clenching her fists, she stormed over to the bench and began frantically scrubbing at the graffiti, but the paint had already set in. Karen's mind raced as she tried to make sense of this outrageous act of vandalism. Who would do this, and why target her specifically? She was simply trying to improve the aesthetic of the park, but now her good deed had been defaced and mocked. Fuming, Karen marched over to the park ranger station, determined to report the incident and demand that the perpetrator be found and punished. The ranger on duty, a young man named Michael, greeted her with a polite smile. "How can I help you today, ma'am?" he asked. "There's been an outrageous act of vandalism in the park," Karen exclaimed, her voice shrill. "Someone has spray-painted Karen's bench all over the teal bench I just had repainted by the duck pond." Michael's brow furrowed with concern. "I see. That's certainly troubling. Can you describe what you saw?" Karen launched into a detailed account of the incident, waving her arms emphatically as she recounted every last detail. "I want that hooligan found and held accountable," she concluded, slamming her palm against the counter. "This is an outrage." The ranger nodded solemnly. "I understand your frustration, ma'am. Vandalism is a serious offense, and we take it very seriously. I'll alert the rest of the team, and we'll start an investigation right away." "See that you do," Karen huffed, glaring at him. "I expect a full report on my desk by Monday morning. This cannot stand." With that, she turned on her heel and stormed off, muttering under her breath about the deplorable state of the park and the unruly behavior of the youth these days. As she walked away, Michael let out a weary sigh, shaking his head. He knew this was just the beginning of what was sure to be a drawn-out ordeal. The next morning, Karen was up bright and early, sipping her coffee and scrolling through the local news on her phone. She eagerly scanned the headlines, hoping to see some mention of the park vandalism incident she had reported the day before. Sure enough, there it was. A brief article with the title, "Mysterious Graffiti," appears on refurbished park bench. Karen's eyes narrowed as she read through the details, her jaw tightening with each passing sentence. The article noted that the park rangers had launched an investigation into the incident, but so far there were no leads on the perpetrator. It also mentioned that the defaced bench had been a recent improvement to the park, funded by a local community group. Karen huffed in frustration. How dare they describe her efforts as simply a recent improvement? This was her personal project, damn it. She had spent hours coordinating with the painters and ensuring the bench looked its absolute best. And now some hooligan had the audacity to deface her hard work. Fuming, Karen quickly typed out an angry email to the park ranger, demanding a progress report on the investigation. She should the mayor's office, the city council, and the community group that had overseen the park renovations, determined to put pressure on everyone involved. Within an hour, her phone began buzzing with responses. The park ranger, Michael, apologized for the lack of progress and assured her that they were doing everything they could to identify the culprit. The mayor's office offered a modest reward for any information leading to an arrest. And the community group expressed their dismay at the act of vandalism, pledging to increase security patrols in the area. But Karen was not satisfied. She wanted swift and severe justice, and she was willing to do whatever it took to get it. Slamming her laptop shut, she grabbed her car keys and headed straight for the park, her mind racing with plans for how to take matters into her own hands. As she pulled into the parking lot, Karen's eyes narrowed, scanning the area for any suspicious activity. The bench was still there, the offending graffiti standing out against the fresh teal paint. She parked her car and stormed over to the bench, her fingers itching to scrub the vandalism away. But just as she was about to kneel down and start cleaning, a voice called out from behind her. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to step away from the bench." Whirling around, Karen found herself face to face with a uniformed park ranger, his brow furrowed with concern. "Excuse me?" she sputtered, her cheeks flushing with indignation. "This area is now part of an active investigation," the ranger explained, his tone firm. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises and refrain from tampering with any evidence." Karen's eyes widened in disbelief. "Evidence?" she scoffed. "This is my bench. I had it repainted, and now some vandal has defaced it. I have a right to be here." The ranger shook his head. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I can't allow you to interfere with the investigation. For your own safety and the integrity of the case, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Fuming, Karen opened her mouth to protest, but the ranger cut her off. "Ma'am, I don't want to have to call the police, but I will if I have to. Please, just go home and let us handle this." With a huff of frustration, Karen reluctantly turned and stormed back to her car, her mind racing with a renewed determination to get to the bottom of this outrage. She may have been thwarted for now, but she was far from finished. Fuming, Karen paced back and forth in her living room, her mind racing with plans for how to handle the park vandalism situation. She couldn't believe the nerve of that park ranger, telling her to leave the scene and let the investigation run its course. This was her bench, damn it, and she was determined to see justice served. As she mulled over her options, a sudden thought struck her. What if she took matters into her own hands and conducted her own investigation? After all, she was the one who had discovered the graffiti, and she knew the park better than anyone. Surely she could find some clues that the bumbling park rangers had overlooked. With a renewed sense of purpose, Karen grabbed her car keys and headed back to the park, this time with a more stealth-like approach. As she pulled into the parking lot, she scanned the area carefully, looking for any signs of suspicious activity. The bench was still there, the offending graffiti glaring back at her. Cautiously, Karen made her way over to the bench, keeping a lookout for any park rangers or other onlookers. Once she was sure the coast was clear, she knelt down and began examining the graffiti more closely. The paint was still fresh, and the letters were sloppy and uneven. Clearly the work of an amateur. Furrowing her brow, Karen ran her fingers along the edges of the spray-painted letters, searching for any clues that might lead her to the culprit. As she did so, she noticed a small, nearly imperceptible fleck of blue paint on the edge of one of the letters. "Aha!" she exclaimed, a triumphant grin spreading across her face. "That must be from the original paint job. If I can find out where that paint was sourced, I might be able to track down the perpetrator." Quickly, Karen pulled out her phone and snapped a few photos of the graffiti, making sure to capture the telltale blue fleck. She then hurried back to her car, her mind already whirring with a plan of action. As she drove home, Karen began making a list of all the local hardware stores and paint suppliers in the area, determined to track down the source of the offending paint. She also decided to enlist the help of her friend, Brenda, who worked at the local community center. Surely Brenda would be able to provide some insight into the types of troublemakers that frequented the park. Once she arrived home, Karen wasted no time in getting to work. She fired off an email to Brenda, outlining the situation and asking for her assistance. She then began scouring the internet for any information on local paint suppliers, cross-referencing their inventory with the color of the graffiti. As the afternoon wore on, Karen grew increasingly frustrated, but she refused to give up. This was her bench, damn it, and she was going to get to the bottom of this mystery, no matter what it took. Finally, just as the sun was starting to set, Karen let out a triumphant cry. She had traced the paint back to a small, independent hardware store just a few blocks from the park. Grabbing her car keys, she headed out, determined to confront the store owner and get to the bottom of this outrage. The bell above the door jingled as Karen burst into the small hardware store, her eyes scanning the aisles frantically. She spotted the store owner, a kindly-looking older man, and marched straight up to the counter. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her voice dripping with barely contained fury. "I need to speak with you about a situation that has occurred in the park." The store owner looked up, his brow furrowing with concern. "A situation? What seems to be the problem, ma'am?" Karen took a deep breath, trying to control her temper. "Someone has vandalized a park bench that I had repainted, and I have reason to believe the paint they used came from your store." The owner's eyes widened, and he shook his head vigorously. "Vandalism? In my store? Heavens, no. I can assure you, we take pride in serving our community and would never condone such behavior." Karen's eyes narrowed, and she leaned in closer. "Then perhaps you can explain how a specific shade of teal paint ended up on that bench. I've traced it back to your inventory." The store owner held up his hands in a placating gesture. Now, let's not jump to conclusions. We sell a lot of paint, and it's entirely possible the perpetrator purchased it from somewhere else. I'm happy to cooperate with any investigation, but I can assure you we have nothing to do with this vandalism." Karen's jaw tightened, and she slammed her palm down on the counter, causing the owner to jump. "I want the name of every single person who has purchased that particular shade of teal paint in the last month. This is unacceptable, and I intend to get to the bottom of it." The owner hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the confrontation. "Ma'am, I'm afraid I can't just hand over customer information like that. It's a violation of their privacy. Perhaps we cooled." "Privacy?" Karen scoffed, her voice dripping with disdain. "When someone defaces public property, all bets are off. Now, are you going to cooperate, or do I need to involve the authorities?" The owner let out a weary sigh, realizing he was fighting a losing battle. "Very well," he conceded. "Let me see what I can do." With trembling hands, he pulled up the store's sales records and began scanning through them, muttering under his breath. After a few minutes, he looked up with a resigned expression. "I've narrowed it down to 3 customers who purchased that specific paint color in the last few weeks," he said. "But I'm afraid I can't give you their names. That would be a breach of confidentiality." Karen's eyes flashed with triumph. "I see. Well then, I suppose I'll just have to conduct my own investigation. And if I find out you're withholding information, you can be sure there will be consequences." With that, she turned on her heel and stormed out of the store, her mind already whirring with a new plan of attack. She was going to get to the bottom of this, no matter what it took. As she drove back to the park, Karen's eyes narrowed with determination. She was going to stake out the bench, and she was going to find the culprit, even if it meant camping out all night. This was her mission, and she was not going to rest until justice was served. That evening, as the sun began to set over the park, Karen pulled her car into the parking lot and settled in to begin her stakeout. She had come prepared, armed with a thermos of coffee, a pair of binoculars, and a notebook to document any suspicious activity. As the minutes ticked by, Karen's eyes scanned the area, searching for any sign of the vandal who had defaced her beloved bench. The park was relatively quiet, with only a few joggers and dog walkers passing through. But Karen was determined to catch the culprit, no matter how long it took. After an hour or so, her patience was wearing thin. She shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her eyes growing heavy with fatigue. Just as she was about to give up and call it a night, a movement in the distance caught her eye. Leaning forward, Karen peered through the binoculars, her heart pounding in her chest. There, near the duck pond, she saw a group of teenagers gathered around the bench, giggling and whispering to one another. Narrowing her eyes, Karen watched as one of the teens stepped forward and pulled a can of spray paint from his backpack. Her breath caught in her throat as she watched him begin to tag the bench, his movements quick and furtive. Without hesitation, Karen threw open the car door and sprinted towards the group, her voice echoing through the park. "Stop right there, you hoodlums," she shouted, her face flushed with rage. The teens whirled around, their eyes wide with panic. The one with the spray paint dropped the can and took off running, the others following close behind. Karen, undeterred, gave chase, her legs pumping furiously as she pursued the fleeing vandals. She could feel the adrenaline coursing through her veins, fueling her determination to catch the culprit and bring him to justice. As the teens darted through the trees, Karen pushed herself to the limit, her lungs burning with the effort. Finally, as they reached the edge of the park, she managed to catch up to one of the boys, grabbing him by the collar and yanking him to a stop. "Gotcha," she cried triumphantly, her chest heaving. The boy, a scrawny teenager with a mop of dark hair, stared up at her with a mixture of fear and defiance. "Let me go, you crazy lady," he shouted, his voice cracking. "Not a chance," Karen growled, tightening her grip. "You and your little friends are going to pay for what you've done." The boy squirmed and struggled, but Karen refused to let go. She dragged him back towards the bench, where the other teens had stopped to watch, their faces pale with terror. "All right, you little punks," Karen snarled, glaring at the group. "One of you is going to tell me exactly who was responsible for that graffiti, or else I'm calling the cops and you're all going to juvie." The teens exchanged fearful glances, but no one spoke up. Karen, her patience wearing thin, tightened her grip on the boy's collar. "Well," she demanded, "I'm waiting." Finally, one of the other teens, a girl with a pierced lip, stepped forward. "It was Mikey," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's the one who tagged the bench." Karen's gaze snapped to the boy she was holding, her eyes narrowing with triumph. "Mikey, huh," she said, a wicked grin spreading across her face. "Well, Mikey, you and I are going to have a little chat with the park rangers. And then we're going to see just how much trouble you're in." As she dragged the reluctant Mikey towards the ranger station, Karen couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. She had finally caught the culprit, and now it was time to make him pay for his crimes. As Karen marched Mikey towards the park ranger station, the teenage boy's fear was palpable. He struggled against her iron grip, his eyes darting around frantically, searching for any means of escape. "Let me go, you old hag," he spat, his voice trembling. "I didn't do anything wrong." Karen scoffed, her grip tightening. "Save it, Mikey. I saw you with my own eyes, spray painting that bench. You're in big trouble now, young man." The boy's face flushed with panic. "You can't prove anything." "That wasn't me, I swear." "Oh, I think the park rangers will be able to sort that out," Karen retorted, a triumphant smile spreading across her face. "And when they find out it was you, you can kiss your little delinquent life goodbye." As they approached the ranger station, Mikey's struggles intensified. "Please, you gotta let me go," he pleaded. "My parents are gonna kill me if they find out." Karen felt a brief flash of sympathy, but it was quickly overtaken by her righteous indignation. "You should have thought of that before you decided to vandalize public property," she snapped. "Now, you're going to face the consequences of your actions." Pushing open the door to the ranger station, Karen marched Mikey inside, her chin held high. "Excuse me, young man," she announced, her voice loud and commanding. "I've caught the vandal who defaced the bench in the park." The ranger on duty, a weathered veteran named Hank, looked up from his desk, his brow furrowed with confusion. "Vandal?" he echoed, his gaze shifting to the trembling teenager. "This hooligan was caught red-handed, spray painting his little tag all over my bench," Karen declared, her eyes glinting with triumph. Hank's expression hardened as he studied Mikey, who had now fallen silent, his shoulders hunched in defeat. "Is this true, son?" the ranger asked, his voice stern. Mikey hesitated, then slowly nodded, his eyes fixed on the floor. Yes, sir, he mumbled. Hank let out a weary sigh and shook his head. Well, young man, you're in a heap of trouble. Vandalism is a serious offense, and you're looking at some heavy consequences. Karen couldn't help but smile, feeling a sense of vindication. See, I told you he was the culprit, she exclaimed, releasing her grip on Mikey's collar. Now, what are you going to do about it? Hank held up a hand, silencing her. Ma'am, I appreciate you bringing this to our attention, but I'll handle the matter from here. We have procedures to follow, and I'll need to contact the boy's parents and the authorities. Karen's brow furrowed with confusion. Authorities? She echoed. But I thought you'd be arresting him on the spot. The ranger shook his head. I'm afraid it's not that simple, ma'am. We need to follow proper protocol and ensure due process. Now, if you'll excuse us, I need to speak with this young man privately. Mikey's eyes widened with relief, and he shot Karen a resentful glare as the ranger ushered him into a back room. Karen, meanwhile, stood there dumbfounded, her sense of triumph slowly giving way to frustration. But what about my bench? She demanded, her voice rising in pitch. What about justice? Hank, already turning away, merely shrugged. We'll look into it, ma'am. But in the meantime, I'd suggest you go home and let us handle this from here. Karen opened her mouth to protest, but the ranger had already disappeared, leaving her standing there, fuming with a mixture of anger and disbelief. She couldn't believe that her heroic efforts had been so unceremoniously dismissed. Gritting her teeth, she turned and stormed out of the ranger station, determined to find another way to get the justice she so rightly deserved. As Karen fumed in her car, her mind raced with a new plan of attack. She couldn't believe the nerve of that park ranger, dismissing her efforts and refusing to take immediate action against the vandal. This was her bench, damn it, and she wasn't going to let some punk kid get away with defacing it. Gripping the steering wheel, Karen took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing thoughts. She needed to approach this strategically, not let her emotions get the better of her. Suddenly, an idea struck her. Reaching for her phone, she began scrolling through her contacts, her fingers tapping furiously. Finally, she found the number she was looking for and hit the call button. Hello, this is Karen, she said, her voice a mixture of urgency and determination. I need to speak with the mayor immediately. It's a matter of utmost importance. After a brief back and forth, Karen was finally connected to the mayor's office. She launched into a detailed account of the vandalism incident, emphasizing the gravity of the situation and the park ranger's apparent indifference. This is unacceptable, she exclaimed, her voice rising in pitch. The perpetrator must be held accountable, and I demand that the city take immediate action to rectify this outrage. The mayor, a seasoned politician well-versed in dealing with disgruntled constituents, listened patiently, his tone measured and diplomatic. I understand your frustration, Karen, he said, his voice smooth and calming. Rest assured, we take all acts of vandalism seriously, and the park rangers are conducting a thorough investigation. However, we must follow proper protocols to ensure due process. Karen's eyes narrowed, and she gripped the phone tighter. Due process, she scoffed. That boy was caught red-handed. The evidence is clear, and he needs to be punished accordingly. The mayor let out a weary sigh. I understand your desire for swift justice, but the matter is not quite so simple. We must ensure that the young man's rights are respected and that he receives a fair hearing. Karen's jaw tightened, and she felt her frustration boiling over. His rights? She spat. What about my rights? This is my bench, and I demand that it be protected. There was a brief pause on the other end of the line, and when the mayor spoke again, his tone had taken on a slightly more authoritative edge. Karen, I appreciate your passion, but I must insist that you allow the authorities to handle this matter in an appropriate manner. If you continue to interfere, you may find yourself facing legal consequences as well." Karen's eyes widened, and she felt a surge of indignation. "Legal consequences," she sputtered. "How dare you threaten me? I am a tax-paying citizen, and I have every right to demand justice for this outrage." The mayor's response was measured and firm. "I understand your frustration, but I must reiterate that the proper channels will be followed. The park rangers will continue their investigation, and any further action will be taken through the appropriate legal channels. I'm afraid I cannot provide you with any special treatment or expedited resolution, no matter how strongly you feel about the situation." Karen opened her mouth to protest, but the mayor cut her off. "I'm sorry, Karen, but this conversation is over. I'd suggest you go home and let the authorities handle this matter. Good day." With that, the line went dead, leaving Karen staring at her phone in stunned silence. She couldn't believe it. The mayor himself had dismissed her pleas and refused to intervene on her behalf. Rage bubbled up within her, and she let out a frustrated scream, slamming her fist against the steering wheel. As the anger subsided, a new determination took hold. Karen may have been thwarted by the authorities, but she wasn't about to give up. She was going to find a way to get the justice she deserved, even if it meant taking matters into her own hands. After all, this was her bench, and she wasn't going to let anyone, not the vandals, not the park rangers, and certainly not the mayor, get away with defacing it. Over the next few days, Karen's determination only grew stronger. She spent hours poring over news reports and social media, searching for any updates on the investigation into the park vandalism. But to her dismay, there was no mention of the incident, and it seemed that the authorities had simply swept the matter under the rug. Fuming, Karen decided to take matters into her own hands. She began organizing a grassroots campaign, recruiting fellow concerned citizens to join her crusade. Together, they launched a series of protests and petitions, demanding that the city take immediate action to address the vandalism and hold the perpetrator accountable. The local media caught wind of the story, and soon Karen found herself at the center of a growing public outcry. Reporters flocked to the park, interviewing her and capturing footage of the now infamous Karen's bench. Karen relished the attention, using it as a platform to voice her outrage and call for justice. But despite her best efforts, the authorities remained steadfast in their refusal to take decisive action. The park rangers continued their investigation, while the mayor's office maintained its stance of allowing due process to take its course. Undeterred, Karen escalated her crusade, organizing a massive rally in the park, complete with signs, chants, and a booming sound system. Hundreds of supporters gathered, all united in their demand for justice. As the rally reached its crescendo, Karen stepped up to the microphone, her eyes blazing with righteous fury. "This is our park," she shouted, her voice carrying across the crowd. "And we will not stand idly by while our hard work and our community's investments are defaced and disrespected." The crowd erupted in cheers and applause, fueling Karen's adrenaline. She continued her impassioned speech, calling out the city's failure to protect its citizens and vowing to take the fight to the steps of City Hall. As the rally drew to a close, Karen stood back and surveyed the sea of faces, a sense of triumph swelling within her. She may have been dismissed by the authorities, but she had ignited a fire in the hearts of her fellow citizens. And together, they were going to make sure that the perpetrator of this heinous act of vandalism was brought to justice, no matter what it took. In the days that followed, the pressure on the city government only intensified. Editorials, op-eds, and social media campaigns kept the story in the public eye, and the mounting public outcry forced the mayor's office to take notice. Finally, after weeks of relentless advocacy, the breakthrough came. The park rangers announced that they had identified the vandal, the same teenage boy, Mikey, who Karen had caught red-handed. He was swiftly arrested and charged with criminal mischief, much to the delight of Karen and her supporters. As the news spread, Karen couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. She had refused to back down, and in the end, Her determination had paid off. The bench, now freshly repainted, stood as a testament to her unwavering commitment to her community. But Karen knew that the battle was far from over. This was just the beginning of her crusade to ensure that the park remained a pristine, well-maintained oasis for all to enjoy. With a renewed sense of purpose, she began planning her next move, determined to make her mark on the city and leave a lasting legacy.